The pandemic almost landed me a spot on one of America's most well-known TV shows. Let's talk about it. But before I get into it, hey, this is Jacob. Welcome to Sunday Yap Session, the show where every Sunday I hop on here and yap at you all about something with some sort of cohesive storyline to carry us all through. Sometimes we do better than others. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to give it a like because that helps me out quite a bit. And if you want to come yap with me every single Sunday, hit that subscribe button because I upload every Sunday and sometimes additional videos as well. Liquid Death, Psycho Cider, let's just get right into this today. So yes, at the beginning of this year, I got invited to be on one of America's most popular television shows, and today I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I teased this in a previous video and then I completely forgot that I meant to talk about this. Shout out to this commenter who reminded me that, hey, I said I was gonna do this. I say things and I totally mean to follow through on them. Sometimes I just forget. So if I ever mention something in a video, just leave it in the comments, be like, hey girl, you said you were going to talk about this, and I will follow up and do it. Part of the reason I was waiting was because I needed to look through all the emails and see what I could and couldn't say and what I could and couldn't show. Based on what I was reading in these emails, I don't think that I can show you the contents of them, so you're just going to have to trust me and I'm going to paraphrase all of them. I have my iPad right here and we're going to read through them. I also am not going to tell you outright whose show this is, just in case there is some sort of legal consequences for it. The person who has this show is almost the exact opposite of me in every single way. That should be enough context clues. So for a little bit of context, at the beginning of this year and throughout my entire content on like TikTok specifically, I have been making content talking about the pandemic, the severity of it, and just my personal experiences navigating all of this, kind of rediscovering the precautions that I feel I should be taking, so on and so forth. And a lot of the earlier videos I did were doing really, really well. Like we're talking hundreds of thousands of views across TikTok, Instagram. And so this was getting the attention of quite a few people, one of which was a producer for this television show who wanted to do a special on COVID. Now we're gonna get into this in a little bit, but ultimately I chose not to go on the show. But as I explain this, we're gonna talk about why. So let's start from like where this all began in February and then we'll kind of get into it. So I'm looking at this first initial email. This was at the beginning of February from this producer. And they basically just said, hey, I am a producer with this show. We're going to be doing an episode about the pandemic soon. We saw your content on TikTok and we wanted to talk to you about this. They specifically were pitching this to me as talking about the pandemic and talking about like the lasting effects from pretty much every single angle. They've done some research on TikTok, found me, and thought that I was going to be a perfect fit for what the producers were going to be looking for. Now, I hadn't watched this show in a very, very long time. I had seen like a couple episodes and some of like the larger viral moments that have come from the show. So I wasn't super familiar with the content, but I was kind of aware of like the nature of these shows, the level of drama and what I believe is exploitation that goes on these shows. From the beginning, I was a little bit sus, but also like the excitement of being offered an opportunity to go on TV, not only just like the media coverage and just like having that be a cool new experience, doing it in a way where I could kind of use it as an activism moment and talk about things I'm passionate about, disability justice, COVID precautions, so on and so forth, was really, really exciting to me. So like I was kind of like hyped from the beginning and I was like, okay, I may like not be super interested in this platform, but like if this is something that I can use to kind of spread this message, I think this would be a good idea. So I responded to the producer and I'm like, hey, I am very interested in this. Thank you for reaching out. Tell me a little bit more. So then same day, and also I want to say too, no shade to this producer, a little bit of shade. We'll get into like we'll get into like where things started to get a little spooky, but overall this producer was very nice to me. So this is like no criticism to anybody who's involved with the production of the show, but we'll get into that. So then she responds the next day and basically was like, explains a little bit more. She said, hey, we're wanting to do this special talking about how the variety of perspectives of people who feel that COVID was mismanaged. She wanted to kind of find people from a bunch of different perspectives, like talking about like maybe business, economics, social impacts, mental health. And she linked me to one of my specific videos, which I'll link below so you can see kind of the context that she was going off of, which I was kind of impressed by because, you know, I thought maybe this was just kind of a random email that like maybe they were just searching for lots of different content creators that had been talking about the pandemic and were just kind of like seeing what was available. This person seemed like they had done their homework and watched quite a bit of the content that I had made. So that was kind of like reassuring in some ways, and that kind of made me think that perhaps this is going to be something that's in good faith, or perhaps something that they're going to be wanting to see like a lot of different perspectives from, because I know that there are a lot of people who have a lot of different feelings about the pandemic, which we'll get into that shortly. That first part of the email was when I was like, okay, this is interesting. The rest of it was where I was like, okay, I think this is actually just gonna be like kind of the content that they've made before. The thing that made me think that is in this email, and I'm remembering how I felt in this moment, the producer was very focused on like negative emotions. So like basically they sent me that video that I had made and they wanted me to put together like kind of some pre-prepared statements or like a list of my feelings. And she was very focused on me conveying like anger and frustration, asking me to include like my strongest statements and da-da-da-da-da. And then she was telling me the person who this show belongs to was launching like a new platform of the show or like a new kind of perspective on the show. And they were pivoting from kind of the messy drama content before and wanting to focus more on like social issues and things like that. And so I went and did a little bit of research on that because like I said, I had some preconceived notions about this show that I believe are accurate. So I was like, all right, let's see what's going on. From what we talked about in the emails and what I saw on the website, it did seem like they were trying to present themselves as trying to shift less from like reactionary sort of outrage content and more towards something that had some semblance of less sensationalism, essentially. So that was also part of the reason why I was like, okay, maybe this might be interesting. We'll look into it and we'll see what's going on. And basically this also just went through like, so if you choose to be on it, we're gonna fly you out, we'll put you in a hotel, give you transport, da-da-da-da-da. So just kind of working out those details. So then I put together this entire like response thing. And around this time too, there were a couple of different things that were going on behind the scenes. First and foremost, I was talking to my best friend about this. Shout out to my bestie, Jacob. And we were kind of just like gagged as well about how this whole thing was happening and that like anyone had reached out to me because it was all just like very like a gaggy experience. I've not gotten like a ton of like mainstream media attention from the things I make online. So that was just kind of like really cool to see someone like acknowledge my work and have an interest in it. But then we were also both like dubious of like, okay, we know what the reputation of this show is. We know what this is probably going to end up being. I had feelings that this show was going to be very sensational, very like dramatic, kind of messy. So I wanted to like plant some seeds and see like if they latched onto some things to use that to kind of influence my decision. I also talked to my therapist too about it, both because like that was just a good idea to talk about that with him. But also I was gonna have to get authorization from him and we'll get into that in a second. But here's kind of the thing that I sent them. I'm not gonna like show this on screen or like read all of it. But basically I was just talking about like my feelings on the COVID pandemic, specifically about like the governmental response. I talked about kind of how this has led to like a lot of social isolation and lack of community, just with everybody as a whole. And then specifically talking about like people like me who are still active and taking precautions, but also people that are living with disabilities or immunocompromised states or things like that, pre-existing conditions, and how a lot of them have been dealing with like isolation because they like literally cannot go outside and engage with the world for risk of like dying or becoming severely disabled. And then I talked largely about just like people's like lack of willingness to mask and how I feel like it's a pretty like low stakes ask as far as an effort to keep people safe, things like that. Now in this email, like I said, I wanted to sprinkle in some things and see like what they would latch onto and see if this was going to be something they were going to try to sensationalize. So I sprinkled in some little key details about my mental health, which I'm not going to get into on here. I've said many times, I am not going to give you all my specific diagnoses because I have no interest in having y'all that involved in my mental health. But I named dropped some of those things in here, and I knew that the juxtaposition of that and the pandemic as a whole could be used to paint a certain picture, and I wanted to see if they made those connections and were going to craft a narrative out of that. And oh boy, did they do that. And then I talked to my therapist about this. We'll cover that just a little bit. I talked to him about that. He was like, girl, are you sure you want to do that? Because at the time I was talking to him, I was like, okay, I might do this. This might be interesting. For the reason I kind of explained previously, not that I was really aligned with the platform at all, but I thought this might be a good opportunity. But we kind of talked about it a little bit. We talked about what that level of visibility was probably going to do, how it is just objectively going to bring me a lot of negative attention, and like if I was ready to deal with that, the plan for how I would handle that, so on and so forth. And one of my main concerns we talked about was like, I like putting myself out here. I like being online. I like making content. But one of my favorite things about it is I control the narrative. I film all my videos, I edit all my videos, everything that comes out on my channels is 100% done by me. I have full control over how I'm presented, how I say things, how many edits I get, and if I'm going on a television program, I have no control over how I'm edited or how things are presented. So I have no sort of guarantee or insurance that this is going to be a good faith engagement and that I'm going to be presented in a way that is accurate to how I'm presenting myself. So we talked about a lot of that, and that combined with this email that I'm gonna get into in a minute, that is where I was like, I'm probably not gonna do this, but I wanted to kind of see like where things went. And after I sent that email with like the list of stuff I had listed out, this producer latched on to all of it. And she was very, very excited all of a sudden, so much more than she was, which is what I thought was going to happen. So basically like all of my stuff kind of gets accelerated, and she is like, okay, like I loved everything you wrote. It was so well written. Let's move forward. Let's talk about this. So as part of the process for getting on the show, I had to make like a 1 minute and 30-second video speaking directly to the host of the show and kind of framing it as like I was asking for advice, which I also was like kind of weirded out by, because I was like, I don't really want advice from this individual. I thought we were just kind of like talk about it, like maybe like a roundtable discussion or kind of like an interview format sort of thing. Granted, a lot of this person's program is centered around giving advice and kind of resolving situations, but with them kind of talking about this being like a pivot in format, I thought that might be a little bit different. But I was like, girl, I don't need advice from this person. I'm good. But again, so yes, she's giving me all these instructions on like how to make the video, all the framing, And for context too, most of the emails on this iPad take up like maybe this much space. This one is like a full page of scrolling. This is where it started to get really, really thorough. So she's telling me how to start all of this, and she's like very much being like, okay, focus on your emotions, focus on your passion. She's wanting me to make a very emotional, very charged, very heated video, which is really funny too, because like if you watch any of my content and even like the stuff that she had specifically been looking at, I am not someone who is like super emotional like on camera. I tend to be pretty calm, pretty neutral, unless I'm like happy or excited or something. Like I am not someone who's like getting on here and being like hostile. I don't really know like what she was expecting, and like I thought that was also kind of a turn off. But then where things started to get extra weird was she basically like wrote me an outline, not like a script of what to say in the video, but she was like, I want you to kind of talk about these things and like kind of elaborate on them. And the way I'm reading this, it's basically like a script almost. And there was no expectation that I was supposed to like read these things verbatim, but she pretty much like wrote it out in bullet points like you would a script. And like I mentioned earlier, like I anticipated, all of those little details about my mental health and stuff and like the connections that could be threaded together, that was all throughout this little script. There's like a whole chunk of this wanting me to speak about these mental health things and if they were exacerbated by COVID or if COVID started them. And just like a lot of like the word choice that was used, it was a lot of like very strong emotion-filled statements and stuff like that, and it was very sensationalized. And in my opinion, like especially looking back at this, I think they were going to try to paint me out as like a quote-unquote crazy person, and I know that that word is like not a word that people like to use. That word is specifically in one of the lines that she's giving about like, oh, maybe you could talk about how you think that people think that you are like this. Like, and so I really think that like that was probably the angle they were gonna go at, was it I was somebody who was probably like taking this too seriously, and as a result I am like isolating myself and like making the risks seem more significant than they are. That's kind of the story I'm getting out of all of this, and that's where I was like at the beginning, I'm like, no shade to this producer, but like shade in a way that like, and this is the job of a producer. A television producer, among other things, is to be creating narratives and to create storylines for these shows and to create compelling narratives. And she did a great job. She did a great job putting this narrative together. It just gave me the ick, and it did not come across in a way that I felt aligned with. And so at that point, I just stopped responding after seeing basically like what I planted for her to kind of latch onto, be like the core of the entire thing. After talking to my therapist, after talking to my best friend, I was like, I think I'm good on this. I think I'm gonna pass. And then I did a little bit of extra research. So like I mentioned, I hadn't watched this person's show in a very long time, and the times that I had, it had been just like brief little clips and stuff like that. So I wasn't super familiar on like this individual and like what their political stances were. I had some kind of assumptions, but I assumed like based on the nature of the work they did, like they may be like more apolitical than everything. But then I did some research into specifically their opinions on the pandemic, and oh boy, oh boy, there were some very interesting perspectives that I do not align with and do not agree with, and think that this individual is not looking at this thing with an objective perspective and is very clearly biased in the way that we're perceiving this. And you can tell that by their coverage of this. And now that I'm in the future, a couple months ago, I like remember this because this all happened. I was like very like, oh my gosh, this is wild. Kind of became my whole world for like basically the week that I was like in correspondence with this person. And then I kind of just forgot about it afterward and kind of just went about my life. And then a couple months ago, I remembered like, oh, I got offered to be on that TV show. Let's see if I can find the TV special, because it was very specifically talking about the pandemic. So it was not that hard to find through their catalog. And I found the episode. I don't know if this was the entire thing because I watched it on YouTube and I think it was like 25 minutes-ish or so. I don't know if this was like an entire TV special or if this was just like one segment of a larger episode or something. But what I watched, I am so glad I did not go on the program. And especially after knowing what this person believes about the pandemic and about their very clear bias, which I feel probably would have been brought onto the special, I have no interest in talking to this individual about this. And especially learning about this individual's politics. I'm good on that. I'm good on that. And I think this was a really good lesson too, which like I kind of knew already kind of going through this. I tend to be someone who engages with people in good faith. I don't like to believe that people are being malicious and nefarious. Not that I'm just like ignorant and let people like take advantage of me and have like no perception of people being malicious. But like if people are engaging me with that way, I'm just gonna engage with them in good faith and engage like I always would. I'm never gonna feel bad for like being honest and being truthful and being authentic in the face of somebody being fake. But this was just a good reminder for myself and potentially anybody who may be getting an offer like this. Ultimately, these people are there to produce a TV program. They are going to tell you what they want to hear to get you on the show. Like, this was not somebody who was engaging with me in good faith and wanted to have like a nuanced, balanced conversation about all the intricacies of these things. They wanted to produce a 30 to 45 minute TV spot that was highly emotional, highly sensationalized. So that was that. I think it would be cool to be on like a show on like traditional media. I know a lot of people treat like traditional media like legacy media now, and it's all about like YouTube and TikTok and blah, 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 blah. I still think traditional media has some really interesting value and interesting perspectives. I think if I were either gonna go on there and talk about something like this, I would want it to be like a reputable news site, some sort of news publication or science publication, definitely not like a primetime TV show or anything like that. That's just like not my tea, not my vibe. So if you're a TV producer out there who's ethical and isn't gonna try to exploit me, let me know and we can chat. But that's pretty much all I got today. Like I said at the beginning, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button. That helps me out quite a bit. And if you want to come yap with me every single Sunday, hit that subscribe button because I upload every single Sunday. I hope you have a great week and I will catch you all in the next video.